Hey guys, and welcome back to ScarletSprites. So today, just going completely unscripted, I thought we'd talk a little bit about Virtua Fighter. People are always asking what I'm working on, and that's kind of been the focus the last few weeks here for me. So I guess just kind of starting off with a story. I mean, Virtua Fighter came into my arcade scene when I was already heavily invested in Street Fighter 2. And I mean, I go to the arcade and that's where easily 3/4 of my money was being spent on Street Fighter 2, and nothing really could steal me away from Street Fighter 2. And that's just where my money went, right? And Mortal Kombat came out, and there was so much hype around that. I played one credit of Mortal Kombat, and I quit, and I came right back to Street Fighter 2. And my opinion of Mortal Kombat has changed maybe a little bit since then, but I think Mortal Kombat 2 is when I really took notice and started playing that series more. But the first one, it really didn't do anything for me. It just felt stiff and slow, and Capcom just had that magic formula for Street Fighter 2. But then Virtua Fighter appeared on the scene, and that cabinet is just, I mean, it is iconic early 90s aesthetics. Just the white with the chrome trim and the mirrored marquee and everything, right? Like, it's trying to be futuristic. And then the polygons. It's unbelievable. And I've talked about this before. I just don't know that I was prepared to see anything like that at the time. And I was a little concerned when I first went over to play it because there's only 3 buttons. I mean, I'm used to playing Street Fighter 2, 6 buttons and the different type of combinations and everything. And obviously, it is a different type of game, and there's a big timing element to Virtua Fighter. But the 3 buttons turned me off initially until I played it, and then I was just absolutely captivated by just how this played. And it was funny because I just talked about Mortal Kombat being slow and it felt stiff. And Virtua Fighter you could argue, is guilty of those same things, but it's just done so well, and it's so gorgeous to look at. Maybe not by today's standards. Maybe people have a different opinion of that, but I love the way the original Virtua Fighter looks. And when I had the opportunity to grab a Virtua Fighter cabinet, I knew it was one that I wanted in my collection. It's the game that stole me away from Street Fighter. It was listed for, I think, $500, but the ad said, go ahead and shoot me offers or whatever. So I was just messing around, on a lunch break, like fooling on my phone. I was just like, hey, I'll take it for $3. And the guy wrote me back like almost immediately. And he's like, yep, that sounds good. And at this point in time, I'm still living in a townhouse. I don't have a ton of space. $300 for a fully working Virtua Fighter, and the guy's going to drop it off for me. I didn't mention that. So yeah, the guy just pulled up, he backed his truck into my driveway and unloaded Virtua Fighter. And it was funny because before he pulled away and before I gave him the money, he unloaded it. I said, I want to turn this on. I don't know, he had like a weird vibe to him. But I plugged it in, and it came on. It booted up. He did make some comment about it not always turning on, which it spooked me a little bit, but it did come up, it played. There was green around the entire screen. And he's like, yeah, I didn't get a good picture of it, but it has this weird green thing going on. And I gave him the money for it at that point, and I just opened up the coin door and pressed the degauss button, and it all went away. And he just stood there staring at it like he never had opened the cabinet ever, which was further proven by when I took out the coin bucket and there was $17 worth of quarters in the machine. I mean, I think he said it was just sitting around and nobody was playing it, so he sold it to me for $300. I got $17 back. Fully working, and it's a beautiful cabinet. It's honestly, it's one of my favorites. I may at some point redo the T-molding on this. It's a little marred up in different places, and the control panel itself it's peeling here on the corners, which it can actually scratch your skin a little bit when you're playing this. It's not great. The thing I've always struggled with, there is a company, I think it's Arcade Art Shop, that's doing a repro of this. And the thing I always struggle with is that the control panel itself, for the most part, aside from this edge, looks really good, and things are only original once. So taking this off always bothered me. So I did find a new old stock control panel overlay for this machine. At some point, I'm gonna have to figure out how to redo the adhesive on the bottom, some type of spray or something, if I wanna apply this. But that kind of keeps this whole thing looking fresh. It keeps it Sega original. It's not a reproduction. So I may get to that at some point this summer, but this is definitely one of my prized possessions in the collection, the Virtua Fighter cabinet. So Virtua Fighter 2, let's move on to that one. This is a game that has eluded me for a very long time. There was a guy that was selling Virtua Fighter 2.1, which was released, I think, in Japan only. And he was like, yeah, the board's $1,200. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. It's a Sega Model 2 board. Like, I'm not, no one's paying $1,200. No, I don't know, maybe somebody did, but it wasn't gonna be me. Recently, this is a little bit of a spoiler, I guess, because I should have saved this for the end of the video. I got a Dynamite Cop, which is also running on the Sega Model 2A hardware, and really all you need to do is swap ROMs out on this. So if you think about the Sega Model 2, the bottom board here, if you think about this as the console, the ROM board on top is the cartridge. So swapping out these chips on the ROM board allows you to play different games. Now, Dynamite Cop has this security board on it, and some games require this security board in order to boot and play. Fortunately, Virtua Fighter 2 and Virtua Fighter 2.1 require no security board. So I can just take this right off of the board. I can burn a set of new ROM chips, pop them on, and I'm off and running. Now, the downside of this for me, the ROM board itself, there's a ton of chips here, right? Like taking all these chips off and putting the Virtua Fighter 2 stuff on is a pain. But if I could find a ROM board that wasn't populated, that I could just pick up, I could put Dynamite Cop on one and then leave Virtua Fighter on the other, and then just swap the ROM boards on this and switch between games. Dynamite Cop is fun. It's really the sequel to Die Hard Arcade, if you don't know. It's called Dynamite Deca in Japan. I don't know. I have a Die Hard Arcade, and I have that set up and running. I don't really feel like I need to have Dynamite Cop as my default for this board. I really have wanted a Virtua Fighter 2 board for a long time, so this is going to be my dedicated Virtua Fighter 2 board going forward, and at least until I can find a ROM board to swap back to Dynamite Cop if I want to. You'll notice the sticker on the ROM board actually says Virtua Fighter 2.1. I don't know if this model ROM board all have that sticker on it, or if maybe this was actually a Virtua Fighter 2 and somebody swapped the ROMs from Dynamite Cop over to this, and then I'm actually reverting it back. I don't know. For my intents and purposes, this is my Virtua Fighter 2 board that has long eluded me and now is finally in the collection. All right, Virtua Fighter 3 on the Sega Model 3 hardware. It's kind of the red-headed stepchild of the Virtua Fighter family. A lot of people don't really talk about this, or everyone goes to 2 or skips forward to 4 or the modern Virtua Fighter 5. I guess that's modern. It's been a while since we've had a new Virtua Fighter in the series. But Virtua Fighter 3, I played most of this on the Dreamcast when it came out, and that was kind of the way I played this because I was in college at the time. The arcades were quite a drive. It was about an hour for a good one from where I was going to college. So the Dreamcast, look, it's no slouch. A lot of great ports are on this system, and for somebody who loves arcades, the Dreamcast was a phenomenal console. So a lot of my Virtua Fighter 3 playing was done on the Dreamcast, but I've always wanted to have the board in my collection. Now the interesting thing, and I haven't talked about this at all yet, none of these games are JAMA. So if you buy these to hook up to a super gun, you don't have a cabinet, there's a bit of a wiring mess on your hands. And if you don't know what you're doing, if you're new to arcades, it's probably not a good place to start because you're going to be looking at a lot of diagrams and probably crimping and creating your own harnesses for a lot of this stuff because it is not JAMA. Now, you can JAMA eyes these and hook them up that way, but again, you need to understand the pinouts coming from the filter board in order to connect them to the right parts on the JAMA harness. It's a little wonky. The good thing, well, before we get to the good thing, the other thing about the Sega Model 3 hardware is that it needs 3.3 volts. It has a line on it that takes 3.3 volts as an input, and neither the Sega Model 1 Virtua Fighter or Model 2 hardware, Virtua Fighter 2, neither of those need that. They're just 5 volts and you're good to go like normal arcade hardware. Virtua Fighter 3 on the Sega Model 3 hardware needs that 3.3 volts. So there's a few ways that you can tackle the power issue with this, and I went with the easiest solution, which is using a computer power supply. And there's some caveats there, and not everybody loves that, because quite frankly, on a computer power supply like this, even though it's a pretty decent one, you can't adjust the rails. There's no way. You just basically plug this in and you hope you're getting 5 volts. You hope you're getting a clean 3.3 volts on this. There's no way to adjust or take that up or down if you need to. Now, I do have a switching power supply that will do 3.3 volts. It's made by Meanwell. I haven't hooked that up. At some point, I'll probably figure out how I want to wire these up inside of my actual Virtua Fighter cabinet, and I'll probably have to deploy some of that stuff. But for now, I'm just happy playing these via the RetroTink 4K on an LCD in the game room. The good thing about the Sega Model 3 board, as far as video is concerned, it has a VGA port right on the filter board. So I can plug that directly into the RetroTink and get a beautiful picture. I mean, Virtua Fighter 3 looks exceptional. I know everybody was blown away when Virtua Fighter 2 came out, looking at how that looked in the arcade, and there really was nothing like it at the time. And thinking about, I always go down like the Midway path. And I'm a big Midway fan, so I was shitting on Mortal Kombat to start this video, and now I'm going to shit on War Gods a little bit. But I'm thinking War Gods came out, and Virtua Fighter 2 had been out for a while, and Virtua Fighter 3 and Midway's putting out War Gods, it's not good. You had to know that your competition had really upped their game. But anyways, Virtua Fighter 3, it's beautiful. I think it's underrated. I've played it a lot more because I only recently got Virtua Fighter 2 in the collection here. So I've been playing Virtua Fighter 3 off of original Sega Model 3 hardware for a while. And I did a lot of the RetroTink 4K testing with this board too. So I've become reacclimated, if you will, to Virtua Fighter 3. And I think it's pretty good. All right, Virtua Fighter 4. So this is on the Sega Naomi hardware, and Virtua Fighter 4 Final Tune, the final version of Virtua Fighter 4, you need the Naomi 2 hardware to run this. Now, I do have the original disc for this still. I no longer have a GD-ROM. I actually sold it. Somebody needed it and was practically begging for one a few years ago, and I just sold it to them because I used the compact flash on Oxenworks' modified NetDim, and prior to that I was net booting. The really cool thing with Oxen's modified NetDim is that it allows you to use NetBoot, where you can basically just send games to the board via a Raspberry Pi, or you can use compact flash cards. So you can use both on this, and there's just a switch that will take you back and forth between whichever option you want to use. So this is how I play Virtua Fighter 4 on original hardware. I did find an original Virtua Fighter 4 Final Tune marquee for my Sega Blast City, so that dresses up the cabinet a little bit, and I really don't play anything else in this. I'll just say it is a dedicated Naomi 2 machine for me, and largely Virtua Fighter 4. And then finally, Virtua Fighter 5. A lot of you guys saw I did pick up a Vuelix. Boy, I guess that's over a year ago at this point. The Vuelix Diamond Orange. I've got a Taito Type X3 in this cabinet, and that's pretty much what I use to run all of my games. It's basically a PC. That's all it is. I think there's a GT 1060 that I upgraded the video card on this. It runs Virtua Fighter 5 pretty flawlessly. There is the updated remake, the esports edition, and the Artax Malte that I'm using, and there's a link in that to launch Technoparrot. And so I can pretty much launch any of the games that Technoparrot runs on the Vuelix. I'll be honest, I bought the Vuelix Diamond Orange in my mind for a lot of the SNK stuff. And when I say a lot, I'm thinking Samurai Showdown, SNK Heroines, and King of Fighters. So really like 3 games in my mind that I wanted arcade versions of to have up on a machine. And I've ended up playing Virtua Fighter probably far more than any of those 3 games combined, just because that's where my heart has been. But to say that the Vuelix Diamond Orange is a dedicated Virtua Fighter 5 machine, it might be a bit of a stretch, but it is what is running on this machine more often than not. So that's just kind of my Virtua Fighter situation here recently. Virtua Fighter 3 mostly throughout the fall there with testing the RetroTink 4K, and then more recently putting together the Virtua Fighter 2 board, having to hand assemble that. But I do want to try to find a way to get some of these boards, probably not all of them, but some of them up and running in my Virtua Fighter cabinet. The real pain with this is that I think Virtua Fighter 2 and 3, the pinout for the controls I think is the same, despite some of the other differences we noted, including the voltages. Virtua Fighter 1, which is what obviously the entire cabinet that I have is wired after, I think the pinout on the controls is different. So I'm going to have to do some type of standardization, and maybe there's a manual swap to switch the controls, but I'm sure I can figure it out. I'm sure it's been done before, or somebody else has probably crossed this bridge. Oh, and I almost forgot, Fighting Vipers. I picked up a Fighting Vipers board, so it's not Virtua Fighter, but Fighting Vipers is kind of in the same vein. It is a 3D polygon fighter from Sega that came out kind of intermittently. I don't know if they're testing the waters or what, but it's a fun series. I never played a lot of it in the arcade. I don't even know if I saw it, if I'm honest. Somebody said it was partially working, and they had it listed pretty cheap. I honestly can't remember what they wanted for it, but it was listed as partially working, and I took a look at the pictures, and it was missing capacitors. And so I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, I'll take a shot on this, right? Because in a worst case scenario, maybe get a good ROM board out of it, or I get a good main board. One of the 2 boards works, and I got something I can salvage out of this. But it was already booting. All I did was replace the capacitors that were missing on it. But yeah, it boots right up and plays. So this is a fun little addition to have Sega original hardware, and these are original ROMs on this. So yeah, it's a cool little addition, but getting this up and running in the Virtua Fighter cabinet along with 2 and 3 could be a bit of a challenge, but we'll see how I make out with this, as well as some other projects this summer. But hey, thanks for listening to me ramble a little bit about Virtua Fighter. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and please leave your own Virtua Fighter memories down in the comments below. I don't know how many. It seems like not a lot of people talk about Virtua Fighter. It seems like everything, and that's probably maybe partially due to the game not getting refreshed as frequently, and we don't get new entries in the series the way we see Tekken or even Street Fighter, which, more recently just came out this summer. So maybe that has something to do with it, but I know you guys. I know the arcade crowd that follows. I know you guys play Virtua Fighter, so drop the comments down below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys all next time. Later.